Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 160. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Nicole Strickland. Nicole is the founder and director of the San Diego Paranormal Research Society, and she has written numerous books about locations that she has personally investigated for paranormal activity. 3 of her books explore the RMS Queen Mary, the retired luxury ocean liner moored in Long Beach, California, that is considered one of the most haunted places on Earth. Nicole has spent her years researching the places she writes about, delving into their history, and interviewing people with connections to the sites. She also explores the locations herself in order to validate the experiences of others. The Queen Mary is a particular favorite of hers due to its rich history and the consistency of its paranormal activity. In this episode, I'll chat with Nicole about her writing journey, how she separates rumors of ghosts from the facts and evidence, and the care she takes to write about the haunted places, while still respecting the privacy of both the spirits and their living relatives, as well as a few other things. Coming up. Nicole Strickland, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I thought what we could do today is talk about the books that you have out. I'd like for you to introduce us to the books that you write, and then tell us a little bit about what inspired you to start writing them, because yours is an interesting niche, an interesting genre. And so I should preface it by saying also that not only are you a writer of a number of books, but you are also the founder and director of the San Diego Paranormal Research Society. So that may give our listeners a bit of a clue. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the types of books you write and what got you started writing them?
Absolutely. Great question. So I've always enjoyed writing, even back in elementary school, middle school, and high school, and in college. I was one of those that always looked forward to writing a paper. I know I'm crazy, but it's just one of those things. And so I never imagined actually being a book author as an adult, but here I am. So my books are nonfiction based on the paranormal and history. So I've written several of those, and I actually started out, and I do obviously have a love for and a passion for paranormal and afterlife research. So writing helps me to blend my passion for that, my curiosity about history, and then of course my love for writing. So my very first book was Field Guide to Southern California Hauntings, and it's a small book, just basically giving an overview of some of California's more haunted, more known locations, so historical sites mainly. And then I came out with San Diego's Most Haunted several years later, which delves more in San Diego locations. So talking about many of the popular historical locations in San Diego. So an overview of their historical tapestries, and of course, some of the paranormal phenomena that goes on at these locations, including some results that my team had investigating those locations. So that's basically San Diego's Most Haunted. I believe it features around 25 locations based within San Diego County. Getting back to Field Guide to Southern California Hauntings, it spans up and down the California coast. I currently have the field guide out of print because I plan to come out with a newer edition to that. And then speaking of one of the most legendary historical sites in California is the RMS Queen Mary, which is moored in Long Beach, California. And so for about almost 20 years now, I've been actively researching the ship's history as well as her paranormal phenomena. She is known as one of the most haunted places in the world. So I've spent many nights on board investigating many different types of rooms on board. So I'm pretty familiar with the historical and paranormal, I guess, ambiance of the Queen Mary. So I've written 3 books. So Haunted Queen of the Seas, The Living Legend of the RMS Queen Mary, that is basically a historical overview and a paranormal overview of the ship. And then the sister book to that is Spirited Queen Mary, Her Haunted Legend, where I delve more into the types of spiritual energies on board, resident ghosts, resident spirits, their characteristics, the experiences that I've had with them, as well as more about the different hotspot paranormal locations on board, such as the pool, the engine room, the boiler rooms, different public meeting rooms, hotel rooms, that sort of thing. And then I wanted to, because I just have such a passion for the Queen Mary, there's a very strong connection I have with the ship. And I've learned that other people, including former crew and passengers, have that as well. So I wanted to write another book that delves away from the paranormal and strictly adheres to the history. And that is RMS Queen Mary, Voices from Her Voyages. And so what I did, and it took about 2 years to write, I interviewed former crew, former passengers, World War II veterans, and war brides that sailed on the ship. So the book is basically their sailing accounts and their sailing memories. So it's a really great read. And so all 3 books are sold aboard in her gift stores, of course, and then of course on Amazon and other online retailing outlets. And then my team, San Diego Paranormal Research Society, we, for about, I think since 2011, we've hosted fundraising tours at the Rancho Buena Vista Adobe in Vista, California. And so right now the tours are on hiatus because of the pandemic, but they're the third Friday of each month, 7 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. And it gives attendees a chance to learn about the site's history. And then we take people throughout the Adobe and run it like a paranormal investigation. So that book, Spirits of Rancho Buena Vista Adobe, is again a historical account of the Adobe, gives some background history of Vista, and then talks about the different paranormal encounters that we've had there, some of the resident spirits there, a little bit about each of the different rooms there. For example, the Major Domo room is known to house skeletal remains. I guess an electrician, when he was installing electricity, I think in the late 20s, early 30s, found human remains on one of the walls. So it's again a historical paranormal account of the Adobe. So that's basically those books that are out. And then I have another one, The Afterlife Chronicles, exploring the connection between life, death, and beyond, that is slated to be published soon by Schiffer Publishing. And that's basically talking about the afterlife, my thoughts about the afterlife. I interviewed different people who have had very profound spiritual experiences with deceased loved ones, friends, pets, coworkers, and so their stories are in there. I talk a little bit about spirit communication techniques and things like that. Let's see, spirit guides, how, in my opinion, how working in the paranormal has helped me deal with grief and loss. So it's kind of a pretty comprehensive book. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell with the books.
Can you give us a teaser of some of the things that they'll find in the books? For example, some of the things you write about the Queen Mary, because I want to eventually get to how you do your research and parse out what you learn versus what's just legend, what has become sort of folklore about these places. What is something that you've been able to research and somewhat experience that demonstrates just how haunted this place is?
Yeah, oh my gosh, Queen Mary, do we have about 3 hours? I'll try to keep this very short. So there are a lot of places out there that may have paranormal activity, but may not necessarily be haunted. My definition of a haunting is that there has to be some sort of historical connection or tie. The spirits that are there, the earthbound or the ghosts, there's a difference between ghosts and spirits, but ghost spirits, the entities that are there at a location have to have some sort of historical connection. And there has to be a consistency in the amount of time the living experiences them. So with the Queen Mary, people can go in there, and I've obviously been doing this on the Queen Mary for many years. They have consistent experiences in different parts of the ship. So for example, one of the well-known energies there is a little girl by the name of Jackie. Now it is thought that she may have drowned in the second class pool, which was stripped in the Long Beach conversion when the ship came in to Long Beach in 1967. So her origins have not been identified. So we don't really know where she comes from, but a lot of people experience her specifically in the former first and third class pool. She's a very beloved energy, very intelligent, meaning that she can communicate with the living. So it's not like a residual type of phenomenon, such as if you go to Gettysburg and you hear a phantom cannon shooting, it's more like a historical imprint in the environment. So with the Queen Mary, there's this consistency in terms of the events that occur there and the different types of energies that are there. So there are several different types of resident energies. Of course, Jackie being one of them. People have seen the spirits of World War II servicemen marching up and down the hallways. There's an 18-year-old crewman, I'm going to leave his name out out of respect for the family, that sadly, tragically passed away in 1966 in the aft engine room. Many people experience him on a daily basis, and a lot of the experiences match. So what I've encountered may match someone who goes to the ship tomorrow and may say, oh my gosh, I had that same experience. So that's kind of the consistency in the Queen Mary. And sometimes you see that with historical locations and other times not. So with the Rancho Buena Vista Adobe, we specifically audio evidence, so electronic voice phenomena, which are words and voices that can be heard on recording devices but not heard at the time. That's very profound at the Adobe, as well as real-time communication, which is instrumental transcommunication. And we use like an AM/FM radio scanner that takes a nanosecond tidbits of sound, and it's thought that energies can use that as a communication device. So through our tenure at the Adobe, we've communicated with similar voices that seem to come through and statements of names. So there's the Adobe's had all kinds of different owners throughout the years. So we've asked questions like, who's with us tonight? And we will get the names of the owners, first name, for example, like Maria Antonia. She's come through saying, this is Maria, things like that. So we'll see that with the Adobe. And then on our tours, and we've been doing those for several years, people in the different rooms will report similar experiences month after month. And so that's more indicative of an actual haunting of a location as opposed to just transient random paranormal activity that occurs. So that's kind of like how that is. So trying to think of anything else with the Adobe without going too long. For example, the skeletal remains in the Major Domo room, we've done research over the years. We've been trying to find out who that individual is. To date, we have not found out exactly who that might be, but we have ideas, one of which is a man by the name of Juan Gonzalez. Specifically in that room, we've investigated and we've done questioning and we've done all these audio sessions. We do get responses from an individual by the name of Juan. So we may think there may be a connection with that.
How long do you spend researching these sites before you decide to write about them? So in addition to the paranormal research you may be doing for these locations, the historical research that you also have to do, how long do you research and when do you know that you have enough to be able to write about a specific incident or location or haunting?
That's an excellent question. So, writing a nonfiction book, there's a lot of tedious research that goes into it, whether it's archival research or talking with historians, historical societies, research for maybe other written pieces. So it's hard to say exactly at what point I decide, okay, I have enough information. If I feel it's almost like an intuitive inclination, I guess. If I feel like I've exhausted the amount of research, and if I decide to do more, I'm still getting the same types of research that I have already compiled and I can't find anything new, then maybe that is an inclination for me to say, okay, I have enough writing the book. And in terms of deciding on when to write, it's hard to answer that. It's almost an intuition sort of thing. So when I started researching the Queen Mary, and really fell in love with the ship, and I really felt that connection, I didn't start writing right away. I would say after about a year or two of actually researching the ship's history and investigating the paranormal, that's when it hit me like, okay, I really would like to write a book on that. So I'm one of these that if I've spent ample time, and that may vary per location, but if I feel like I've spent enough time that would give me enough information, of course, on my own, of course, not thinking of additional information that I research. If I feel I have enough of that to go by to write a book, that's when I'll decide to write one. So let's say I have an idea for writing maybe a book on a location that I've never been to. Even though I may want to write on that, it's just my personal opinion to say, you know what, before I do that, I'd like to spend some time at the location, or at least spend a lot of time talking with the people that have spent times at those sites and things like that. So hopefully that answers you. That's an excellent question, though. That's a very excellent question.
What has happened, and I'm going to guess this has happened, but maybe it hasn't. What happens when you come across something that, we'll call it, say, a rumor? Everybody believes this particular location is haunted, maybe this particular kind of a spirit or ghost. But researching it, you've either not found anything to support that, or what you have found supports something else. Have you ever come across that, where the lore is one thing, but what you are finding is something else?
That's absolutely. And I'll give you a general example of that. So, in the paranormal field here, it's very infused in pop culture. We have a lot of these TV shows out there, and don't get me wrong, I'm not going to criticize them. I myself have been on local and national TV, but the problem with it is that these shows and entertainment may give people a false idea of the authentic, what I call authentic paranormal phenomena versus what someone may think it is by watching entertainment shows. So an example would be that right now, the whole concept of demons is very popular. And I don't want to criticize people that believe in them, but we're finding out that in most cases, 99.9% of the time, what people may think is an actual malevolent haunting or demonic sort of situation is actually not. So that's an example of that. Now, with myth, it's hard with the paranormal because it's not necessarily a black and white science. Many people consider it a pseudoscience. I'm not one of those. I think we can start to employ the scientific method in the paranormal, but you have people's opinions a lot, and it's hard to, you may like find out something, you may in your research say, okay, well, like for example, the Queen Mary, there's a room on there called B340. And so there's a lot of myths with that room, such as, oh my gosh, it's the most haunted room on the ship. People have been murdered in that room. The maids have refused to go in and make the bedding. So through my research and colleagues that also investigate the ship, they've found out that a lot of these myths aren't true. So when you can verify that, then yeah, I've written about it. So in Spirited Queen Mary, I talk a lot about B340 and the reasons why some of these myths aren't true. But in the paranormal, you're contending with a lot of opinions. And sometimes people are just going to believe what they're going to believe, no matter what factual evidence you point to them. So that's kind of the problem with the paranormal, because it's not necessarily a black and white science. You kind of lend into getting involved with people's beliefs. And no matter what you say, you can say, oh my gosh, we've been investigating this site for so many years. We've found these patterns, these specific patterns don't support the specific myth. That's great. They may be open to your information or they may not be. And I found a lot of that with private residence clients, because we do go in not just historical sites and businesses, but we go in to homes. And of course, we're very picky on what homes we select for various factors. but we've had situations where we'll investigate the home, we'll do some property research of the land, and we may have a certain set of subjective information, which is personal experiences we've had there, versus objective data, which is maybe data in the form of photographs or an audio capture, for example, that may not support their beliefs. And we try to educate, but sometimes people are just going to believe what they're going to believe when it comes to the paranormal, and there's really nothing you can do about that.
Have you ever come across something in your research or your own experience and thought, I am not going to write about this? Do you have any lines you don't want to cross when it comes to including something in one of your books versus not?
Excellent. You asked, these questions are phenomenal. So in the paranormal, I am one of these researchers, and there's many more, not just me, that treat it with respect and treat it with dignity. And sadly, I'm going to go back to the entertainment field. Sadly, it's showcasing it as something that is here for our amusement, that energies, spirits, ghosts, even other energies from other dimensions are here for our amusement, things like that. So I am one of those that treat it with respect and treat it with the dignity that it deserves. So if I feel at any point that what I write is going to cross that line and almost become exploitative of the dead or the afterlife, I will choose not to write it. So one example of that is going back to the Queen Mary, and this is a small example, but the former crewman that I mentioned earlier, the 18-year-old crewman from Yorkshire that sadly passed away on July 10th, 1966 in the aft engine room, his family has come on record. They don't like when people talk about him in terms of potentially being a ghost or a spirit. They don't like that. So in my books, I will not reference him by name. I'll just give initials. And even if I do radio shows where I talk about the Queen Mary, I will just use his initials and not give the full name. So that's a very, very small example, but I try to, in my writing, paint the paranormal and give it the authenticity that it deserves and not treat it as though it's a spectacle. And so sadly, we're seeing a lot of that in the field.
Do you like to read about this kind of thing? Do you like the paranormal genre yourself when you choose to read, or do you read completely outside the genre?
I both. So there's different, probably should have mentioned this at the beginning. There's different genres so you have the paranormal, investigative, and research field. So some people like myself may specialize more in the ghosts and hauntings and spirit realm or afterlife, as in my example. There's the study of aliens and UFOs, ufology. There's cryptozoology, so the study of different types of beings and animals that have not really been that science kind of disproves. So like the Yeti, Bigfoot, for example, Loch Ness monster. There's the occult. There's psychic mediumship, and I mentioned afterlife studies. So there's all these different subfields of the paranormal. I enjoy reading about. Back behind me, there's a bookshelf of probably close to 100 books on the paranormal. So yeah, of course, I enjoy reading on it. But I like to read novels too, of course, and go outside of the genre. Dan Brown, for example, is one of my favorite authors, and Stephen King, for example. So yeah, I go in spurts though with reading. I'll read like several books and then I'll take like 2 months where I don't read anything. So I'm kind of weird like that. It's funny.
And I'm just curious, have you come across any novels, any fiction writers who you think get it right when they talk about the paranormal, things that you study yourself? Do you think anybody comes close?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to name off the top of my head. Yeah, so like oh gosh, like it's fiction, but bringing in like actual aspects of a history of the site, or really talking about ghosts or spirits or the paranormal in an accurate light. Yes, I have come across, and I have some books, and I'm blanking on their names right now. I mean, these are actually researchers in the field that have delved into fiction. So, and for the life of me, there's two, and I can't think of their name. Oh my gosh, I'll think of it when we get off the show, of
Sure.
course. My gosh.
Well, let's talk about your wish list. Are there things that you still want to do as a writer? Are there other books that you want to write, other either types of books you want to write, other sites you want to write about? What's on that wish list of yours?
Oh, good question. So let's see. I have several. So, well, one of the books that I'm actually co-authoring, it's not really a wish list, but I guess obviously it's going to be published where it's me and Marie Jones and Denise Agnew, and we're writing a book. It's an anthology, and so it's women in the paranormal, or women. I think it's women on the fringe, groundbreaking women in the paranormal. So we're interviewing all kinds of different women from different areas of the paranormal on their experiences and things like that. So that's coming out. I'd like to. I've thought about writing maybe a series, like a book series, but have it themed. So maybe haunted hospitals, for example, or travel locations that are popular but also known to be haunted, things like that. Let's see, a couple of others. There's a spirit communication techniques book that I'm currently working on, and then maybe some more books on the afterlife, because I'm not only, as I've been involved in this field, I'm kind of delving more into I'm of course paranormal research, of course, but delving more into afterlife studies. So, and then maybe down the road, I'd love to maybe write maybe a novel or two with a paranormal twist. So we'll see about that.
I'm curious if you have received any advice along your writing journey that has made a difference for you, particularly in translating what you see, what you experience into words on the page, because I'm sure it's a difficult task to communicate fully to someone who is not there and hasn't experienced it and doesn't necessarily have the same frame of reference. Is there any advice that you've received that's helped you with your writing?
This is going to sound weird, but the spirit realm and just a lot of my encounters with the paranormal and all these investigations that I've done, that those have kind of given me, I know that sounds weird, but those have given me a little bit of advice on, okay, this is how to formulate a book, or how I'd like to approach telling the story of the specific site. But just when I've talked to fellow authors, they've basically reiterated something that I already think, which is just follow your gut and follow your wisdom. And for me, when I write, I almost visualize like a movie playing in my head. So if I'm trying to formulate a story or talking about an experience, I can kind of see it in my head as it's playing. So almost it's like myself is giving myself advice, if that makes sense.
Well, good advice comes from all over, and if you can tap into it from the spirit world, then you're ahead you're ahead of a lot of us. So
yeah, I'd like to think so anyways, in terms of it helping, but I think it has.
So if people want to get in touch, follow you, learn about your books, find out what's going on, new releases, all that kind of stuff, where should they go to find you and that information?
Sure. So website wise, my main website is authornicolestrickland.com. And then our team website is san diego paranormalresearch.com. And then I have a small little website devoted to the Queen Mary, and it's the title of my second book. It's spiritedqueenmary.com. Social media wise, on Facebook. My show handle is Afterlife Chronicles and Beyond. I have a show, which is the Afterlife Chronicles, which airs Thursday nights on WLTKDB.com at 6 p.m. Pacific. And then, of course, the SDPRS is on Facebook at SDPRS. For me, at author Nicole Strickland. Let's see what else. Twitter, SDPRS Nicole. And then, let's see, Instagram is author Nicole Strickland. And then book-wise, you can find them pretty much in all the online retailing outlets and in some niche stores in San Diego as well.
Wonderful. Well, Nicole, I want to thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today. And I want to wish you luck with all of your books, the one that's soon to come out, plus all the works in progress. We'll look forward to all of that. So congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far, and best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a huge honor.
Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.